Eventually, I reached a point where I no longer needed his guidance the way I once did, and that realization felt both empowering and emotional. Not because he was leaving, but because he had done exactly what he was meant to do. He helped me build something within myself that didn't depend on his presence. I could make decisions with clarity, face challenges without panic, and trust my ability to handle whatever came next. There was a moment when I thanked him for everything, expecting him to say something meaningful in return. Instead, he simply told me that I had done the work myself. At first, I disagreed, but later I understood what he meant. He didn't change my life by carrying me forward, he changed it by teaching me how to walk on my own. That lesson stayed with me more than any advice ever could. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. I still faced uncertainty, failure, and fear. But the difference was how I responded to those things. I stopped seeing obstacles as signs to turn back and started seeing them as tests of what I had already learned. Each challenge became a reminder of how far I had come, not how far I still had to go. Looking back, I realized that growth doesn't always come from dramatic events. Sometimes it comes from someone who stays consistent, who holds up a mirror without judgment, and who believes in your potential before you do. He didn't save me or fix me. He helped me rediscover myself when I had forgotten who I was capable of becoming. Today, I carry that impact forward. In the way I show up, the way I take responsibility, and the way I treat others. His influence didn't end when our paths shifted, it became part of who I am. And that's why I can say, without hesitation, that he changed my life forever, not by changing me, but by helping me grow into myself. As time went on, the changes started to show in ways I hadn't expected. It wasn't just about what I was doing differently, but how I was thinking. I stopped waiting for motivation and started relying on discipline. Some days still felt heavy, but I no longer used that as a reason to quit. I began understanding that progress wasn't supposed to feel exciting all the time. Sometimes it was quiet, uncomfortable, and lonely, and that was normal. He remained a steady presence, not hovering, not controlling, just there. He let me struggle without stepping in to save me, and that taught me more than any advice ever could. When I failed, he didn't soften the truth, but he also didn't let me drown in it. He reminded me that setbacks were part of the work, not signs that I wasn't capable. That balance between honesty and support slowly built something solid inside me. I started taking responsibility in areas I used to avoid. I spoke up when something mattered instead of staying silent. I made decisions instead of letting life decide for me. These weren't dramatic moments, but they added up. Each choice reinforced the idea that I had control, and that realization was empowering. I wasn't just reacting to life anymore, I was participating in it. What surprised me most was how my relationships began to change. As I became more grounded, the way I treated others shifted too. I listened better. I stopped projecting my frustrations onto people who didn't deserve it. He noticed this and pointed it out once, not to praise me, but to make me aware of how internal growth affects everything around you. That stayed with me. By this stage, I no longer questioned whether change was possible. I had proof in my daily actions. I wasn't perfect, and I still had doubts, but they no longer controlled me. I had learned how to stand on my own, how to face discomfort without running from it. And even though the journey wasn't over, I knew one thing for sure, I was no longer the person who felt ill. After that shift, things didn't get easier right away. In fact, they felt heavier. Once I became aware of my patterns, I couldn't ignore them anymore. Every excuse I made echoed louder in my head, and every missed opportunity felt like a choice rather than bad luck. He didn't pressure me, but his steady example made my old habits feel out of place. I began to realize that comfort had been my biggest enemy. There were moments I pushed back. I told myself he didn't understand my situation, that change wasn't that simple. I avoided certain conversations and kept my distance when his questions hit too close to the truth. But he never reacted with frustration. He stayed patient, treating my resistance not as a flaw but as part of the process. That patience did something unexpected, it removed my excuses. I couldn't blame pressure or judgment anymore, because there was none. Gradually, I started taking small steps. Nothing dramatic, just intentional choices. I showed up when I felt like quitting. I followed through on things I usually abandoned halfway. Each time I did, he noticed, not with praise, but with quiet acknowledgement. That was enough. It made me feel seen in a way that wasn't conditional on success, only effort. I also began to understand that growth wasn't about becoming someone else. It was about becoming honest with myself. He talked openly about his own failures, not to impress me, but to show that progress comes from responsibility, not perfection. Hearing that changed how I viewed my own mistakes. They stopped feeling like proof of weakness and started feeling like lessons I could actually use. By this point, my mindset had shifted again. I wasn't just aware anymore, I was engaged. I started believing that my actions mattered and that consistency, even when unnoticed, was powerful. I hadn't reached clarity yet, but I was no longer standing still. For the first time, forward felt possible, and that made all the difference. I didn't realize how lost I was until he walked into my life. At that point, my days felt repetitive and empty, filled with routines that gave me no direction and conversations that never went deeper than surface level. I carried a quiet frustration inside me, the kind that doesn't explode but slowly drains your energy. I thought this was just how life was supposed to feel, dull and uncertain, and I had accepted it without question. He wasn't loud or dramatic when he arrived. There was no big moment, no instant connection, just a calm presence that felt different from anything I had known before. He listened more than he spoke, and when he did speak, his words carried weight. He noticed things others ignored, like how I avoided eye contact when talking about my future or how I laughed things off when they actually mattered to me. It was uncomfortable at first, almost annoying, because he saw through the version of myself I showed the world. What surprised me most was that he never tried to fix me. He didn't lecture or give long speeches about how I should live my life. Instead, he asked simple questions that stayed with me long after the conversation ended. Questions about what I wanted, what I feared, and what I was running away from. No one had ever asked me those things so directly, and I didn't have clear answers. That realization alone shook me. Slowly, his presence began to challenge the way I thought. He showed me, through his actions, what consistency looked like. He kept his word, showed up when he said he would, and treated people with quiet respect. Watching him made me aware of how often I made excuses for myself and how easily I settled for less than I deserved. I started noticing my own habits, my avoidance, my lack of effort, and for the first time, I felt responsible for changing them. By the end of that first phase, something inside me had shifted. I wasn't transformed yet, but I was awake. I knew my life couldn't stay the same, because once some